Hey guys, Michael Mershon, your Texas broker with eXp here in San Antonio. Getting back on, wanted to give you an update on the changes. If you have not heard of the changes, they have been effective since April, so hopefully you haven't been using anything else but the new contract. But just in case you haven't had a chance to review it and see what updates have been made, I'm going to give you a little bit of a side-by-side comparison. On the left here, we have the previous version. So as you can see, 212 of 18. And this is version 2014. And then on the right here is 11/10/2020 is the date you're going to want to look for. And this is version 20-15. So two different versions of the same contract. The one on the right is the one we're going to be using currently because we are past April and it is now mandatory. So in an effort to keep this video relatively manageable time, I'm not going to read verbatim everything. I'm going to kind of give you the highlights and point out what you need to know in each section. But I will try to go slow enough that if you want to pause and read, you can do that as well. So starting off, anything in blue is going to be new verbiage. Anything in red is going to be stuff that was removed. So as you'll notice when we get into it here at the very front end, they've revamped the start of the contract and the end of the contract primarily. So the first 6 paragraphs is going to be where you see the bulk of the change. And that pulled a lot of the stuff from the end forward. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we get into it. But again, anything in red has been removed and anything in blue is new. So diving in here, first paragraph has not changed. So paragraph 1 is still the parties. There is nothing new there. Paragraph 2, we do have a few changes in paragraph 2 here. So paragraph 2, the property. The only real change in the start of this is property. They basically removed the asterisks and added property in parentheses. So they removed these asterisks and added property, nothing really earth-shattering there. Section B of paragraph 2, all they did was removed this verbiage, so owned by seller and basically what that's saying is that all of their property attached to the above described real property. So so whether or not the seller actually owns it, if it is attached to the property, it is considered a fixture. Accessories, this they did not change, or they did not remove anything, rather they did change it, but they simply added some more verbiage to further clarify things. As you'll see, the previous paragraph ended right here. That is where it ended. As you can see, accessories was the last word. So what they did, security system that are not fixtures. So essentially, if it is not attached to the wall per se or attached to the structure, then it would traditionally not be considered a fixture. But security systems that are not fixture, they're essentially lumping that in as an accessory. And then where it ends, they added another sentence here. So controls, including seller's transferable right to the software and applications used to access and control improvements or accessories, and hardware used solely to control improvements or accessories. So basically what that's saying, like for example, if you have a home, a smart home system, maybe something that comes with your alarm, for example, or you have a smart lock, you can control your thermostat, maybe you have a camera involved, like a Ring or maybe an outdoor camera of some sort. Basically those controls, anything that controls those, so whether that's hardware, software, applications, whatever that is, that has to come with the transfer of the property. So the seller cannot hold on to, say, give you the accessories, but not the ability to access and use those accessories. So that's become more prevalent recent days because everything or most things now are Wi-Fi enabled, and being such, they can be controlled from anywhere. So for example, a camera can be monitored from pretty much anywhere in the world if it's connected to Wi-Fi. So that is the big change there. They didn't really take a whole lot out, just that one little sliver up there, but they added a bunch. Sales price, paragraph 3, absolutely the same. Nothing changes there. As you'll see here, paragraph 4 is completely gone. So it was previously license holder disclosure. That has been completely removed. It no longer exists in this section. It's actually been moved to the very end of the contract, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But leases is the new paragraph. So essentially anything that deals with leases, whether it's a residential lease, there's a new thing called a fixture lease. That is not something that was part of the contract before, or at least there wasn't a specific addendum referencing that. and then natural resource leases. So we're dealing with three kinds of leases here. The first one, residential lease. You're primarily going to see that if you have an investment property. So somebody that owns a property has rented it out. I ran into this situation not too long where it had always been an investment property, so the owner had never lived there, and the buyer that was purchasing the property had no intentions of living there because they wanted to continue renting it out. So there was a tenant that was occupying the property, therefore all copies of the lease and everything related to the lease had to be given from the seller to the buyer. And then fixture leases, this is something new. There was not previously a section for this or an addendum. So this is actually a new addendum that has been created by the Texas Real Estate Commission. And I'm going to read this just because it's new. Fixture leases. Fixtures on the property are subject to one or more fixture leases. For example, solar panels, propane tanks, water softener, security system, and the addendum required fixture leases is attached to this contract. So essentially it's saying that if you're checking this box, then there is a fixture that is being leased. It is not owned by the seller, therefore it can't be legally transferred in terms of ownership, but they are transferring the lease, so the right to continue using it with the property is what that's saying. Natural resource leases. So natural resource leases, that's going to be things like your gas, mineral, water, any kind of other natural resources that are being leased in part of the property. You're not going to run into that generally anywhere in the city limits. That's primarily going to be more rural stuff. If you have maybe acreage in the city that's in an unrestricted subdivision, then you may run into it there. But generally, if you have never dealt with natural resource leases in the past, then this is probably not something you're going to need to be super familiar with because you're not likely to run into it now. But if you do have specific questions on that, then I would consult your broker and they would be the best person to help you with that. That's it for paragraph 4. As you can see here, paragraph 5 has gotten significantly longer. This used to be paragraph 5 here. That's actually all the original verbiage from that been removed. And the big change here is the earnest money and termination of option are now the same paragraph. So those are both covered in paragraph 5. And the big thing you need to know about that is that both the option fee and the earnest money are going to be delivered to the title company. So the escrow agent, and that again is the title company that's going to be handling the transaction, not the individual closer that's going to be handling the transaction. So when you see escrow agent, make sure you have the name of the title company as opposed to necessarily the escrow agent that you're going to be personally working with. And again, the verbiage is very similar. So within 3 days after the effective date, buyer must deliver to the escrow agent at the address the amount of the earnest money as earnest money and the amount as option fee. And again, if you have those two things, you can do them in one check, you can do them in 2 checks, but in either case, it is made out to the title company as opposed to previously, the option fee was always made out to the seller. It will still end up going to the seller, but it is not going to be made out to the seller because it will go to the title company and the title company will disperse it on their own. So basically this little section down here, section 4, says that there's not an additional authorization required for the title company to release that option fee to the seller. And essentially within 3 days is still the timeline. So there is a stipulation that if the third day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, it is automatically rolled till the following day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday by the end of the business day. So the termination of option, again, this previously it was the amount for the days. Now it's split a little bit. So you have the amount as the option fee, and then you have the days for the option fee down here. So generally speaking, the earnest money is going to be 1%, and most people use $10 per day as a pretty standard number. So whatever those two correlate to based off your offer price and the number of days you're asking for is going to fill in correspondingly there. And again, $10 a day and 1% are just general numbers, you can use, you can do $1 for 100 days if that's what the seller is willing to agree to. It's really what you guys can come to an agreement on and not necessarily what the industry standard is. But just to give you an idea of what I commonly run into. So similarly, the termination of option, if the buyer gives notice, the notice does have to be given by 5 o'clock still. So 5 p.m. is still the deadline. And it is in the time zone that the property is located. So I get a lot of buyers, or frequently get buyers from California, and they have about a 2-hour time difference from where we are here in San Antonio. So we're in Central Time, and they're 2 hours off of us. So their 5 o'clock is not going to be my 5 o'clock. And since the property they're purchasing is in San Antonio, the only time frame that matters is Central Standard Time, because that is going to be when the option period expires. So it's very important that you have all your repairs negotiated, all your terms renegotiated. Anything that you're going to do during the option period has to be done and finalized by 5 o'clock, because once 5:01 hits on that, the end of that day, whatever. So if you have a 7-day, 5 o'clock on the 7th day after it's executed, then you at 5:01 you lose that option period. So there is no recourse. You can't go back and say, hey, it's 5:01 now, I want to get all these things done. You've effectively lost all rights to ask for that, because you have given up your right to terminate. So you have no real leverage in that case. So failure to timely deliver the earnest money and failure to timely deliver the option fee, again, it has to be within that 3-day window, or there is recourse that the seller can terminate or exercise other remedies. And if it is the option fee that is not delivered, again, then you don't have an option fee. So that option fee has to be there on time, at the right place, or you do not have an option fee. And that would be really, really bad for your sellers, unless the intention is to not have an option period. And that's a decision you guys have to make specifically. But again, make sure you have a dollar amount filled in, and make sure that that dollar amount, whatever that is delivered to the title company within those 3-day window. Again, Saturday, Sunday, and legal holidays do not apply. So if it happens to fall that the 3rd day is on one of those, then it automatically rolls to the next day. You don't have to get an extension or do anything in that case. It is built into the contract like that. But again, it's very important, because time is of the essence, as it says here very concisely in section E. Time is of the essence for this paragraph, and strict compliance with the time for performance is required. So there is no way to come back and say, hey, you didn't tell me, I didn't know, because it's clearly written right there for you. So that's the biggest change by far in the whole contract that has been made, is that section there. So it's, in terms of functionality, it hasn't changed a lot. The verbiage has changed a little bit, but it's still, you have to deliver the earnest money, you have to deliver the option money. The big change that we're seeing is that both of those can be delivered and made out to the escrow agent. And I believe the reason they did that is because a lot of times the escrow agent would end up receiving the option and earnest money check, but the option check would be made out to the seller. So then they'd have this check made out to the seller, and that was it was not the proper way of doing business, because the title company can't sign for the option fee under this old version of the contract. So that has since been eliminated. They're actually the only ones that can sign for it. So the listing agent and the owner can no longer sign for it, or at least there's not a spot for them to sign for it on this current contract. So paragraph 6, title policy and survey, no real changes there. So we're just going to scroll down. So as you'll see at the top of each page and the bottom of each page here, the version, the Trec number has changed, and the date has changed. So if you're questioning if you're on the right form, again, it's 20-15 and 1110 of 2020. So those are 2 reference points that you can use, and those should be on the bottom and top of each page respectively. So paragraph 7, property condition. Again, nothing changes in paragraph 7, getting down to 8. Let me catch up on this side here. So paragraph 8, as you can see, this paragraph, again, technically speaking, it has been completely obliterated, because this is all that was here before, was this little blurb. and that was eliminated. So paragraph 8, for all intents and purposes, has been completely rewritten. And this covers broker and or sales agent disclosure. And this is something that was previously referenced at the beginning of the contract, but it has been moved down and lumped into paragraph 8 here. And essentially what that's saying is that if you or anybody you are related to, even if it's a close friend, I would disclose it. It may not be legally required, but for purposes of protecting yourself, if you have any connection to the people that you are helping purchase, or you yourself have any interest in the property that's greater than 10%, then I would just go ahead and disclose it, because it is better to have it all out there than to have them come back and say, hey, you never told me this, and I find out you guys are actually related, and I wouldn't have sold you the property if I knew that. So to prevent blowback on yourself, it is best to just go ahead and disclose that, even if it's a distant relative that maybe you have never even seen. Maybe they're buying the property sight unseen, so you still haven't seen them. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, more is better in this particular situation, in my opinion. And then the broker's fee, again, it's basically the same verbiage. All obligations of the party for payment of broker's fee are contained in separate written agreements. So if it's an MLS property, then generally speaking, you're going to have that agreement because there's a shared cooperative agreement. So the percentage or the fee is going to be listed in the MLS, and that's generally not an issue. Closing date. As far as paragraph 9, they didn't add anything. All they did was take away section 5 under paragraph B, and that is referencing residential leases. And as you know, that has been moved to the very top of the contract. So it's not completely gone. It's just no longer in section 9. Section 10, possession. There's a couple things that have changed here. For starters, buyer's possession, they made it all caps and underlined it. Couldn't tell you exactly why, but they felt it was necessary. And then again, I referenced this a little bit in the previous, or the top section there, when it was referring to accessories and the hardware, the software, anything that controls those accessories, if they're leased or owned. That is going to be, again, this section they've added here about smart devices. So that wasn't in the previous contract. As you can see, the lease section has been eliminated in that paragraph. B is now smart devices. So essentially what they're saying there is that if you're transferring smart devices with the house, whatever those devices may be, that you have to do two things. You have to give the buyers the full access to be able to use all the applications, the hardware, the software, anything else that may be involved. So that includes passwords, login IDs, anything like that, as well as delete those so you no longer have access to them as a seller. So once the transfer of ownership takes place, then you should cut all ties with accessing any of those devices, and the new owner should have full access to be able to get in and control them themselves. And of course, if you are purchasing some kind of smart application, or you're getting a lease with that, it would be wise to go ahead and set up your own credentials and log in and create your own accounts and all that, just because you don't want to leave it to chance that these people, whoever you're buying from, are actually going to follow through and do what they say they're going to do. It's much better in your interest to go ahead and just create your own account, so you have the security of knowing that you have fresh, clean starts there. So section 11, I found this a little bit comical, to be completely honest. They didn't technically remove anything. They just took away all the space that you're able to write anything. So as you can see, my previous warning was be very careful when you're writing anything in this section, and I would reiterate that warning here. Paragraph 11 can be construed as practice of law depending on what you write in there. So anything with, for example, an outcome can generally be considered practice of law, and that could put your license in jeopardy. So in the event that you feel there's no other contract, no other addendum that fits what you're trying to do, I would check with your broker and get their permission before you write anything in paragraph 11. Again, that's one of the paragraphs that gets people in trouble the most and has the most backlash against you personally. So be very careful about that. Again, no change there, but just wanted to reiterate that because that is an important point. Paragraph 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, no changes there. So 18, escrow, I'll just go ahead and read it here. Escrow agent may require any disbursement made in connection with this contract to be conditioned on escrow agent's collection of good funds acceptable to the escrow agent. So basically, they want to have received the money before they're obligated to pay anything out, which very common sense makes perfect sense to me. And then down here, there's a few kind of grammatical things. For the most part, nothing's really changed. They changed the verbiage around a little bit. The big thing here is that the escrow agent can deduct authorized expenses from the earnest money. So whichever party is going to be receiving the earnest money, entitled to it back, the escrow agent does have the option of deducting qualifying expenses from that earnest money before it's released to whoever it's entitled to, whether that's the buyer or the seller. So that's the big change in that one. And again, this was a commonly disputed thing because you're entitled to the earnest money doesn't always mean that you're going to receive it, because a lot of times in situations where it wasn't necessarily cut and dry, both parties would believe they're entitled to earnest money. So without a formal release, most escrow agents won't release anything. And if both parties aren't willing to sign off on one or the other of them getting it, then typically it will just end up sitting there and nobody will get it for an extended period of time. So that's section 18. 19, 20, again, nothing changes there. Coming down to 21, kind of a funny little change, but all they're doing here is you have the option of email and fax for both the buyer and the seller. Previously, it was just fax on one line, email on one line. Now they have options for both lines. Why they still include fax? Somebody out there must use it, but I can't remember the last time I actually sent or received the fax. So that's it for paragraph 21. And then jumping down to 22 here. And again, this is I referenced at the start of the video, there's a couple additional addendum that have been created and are now part of the official contract. And again, they have their own pretty little boxes where you can check and make them official. Before, if you had anything related to leases or anything, that would have to be done down here unless it was a short-term lease. But that is an official addendum now. The addendum concerning fixture leases, again, that is a new addendum, and that is included as well. So they haven't taken anything away from agreement of parties, but they have added to it. And then 23. As you can see, termination of option, that no longer exists. That has been lumped in with the paragraph at the start. And 24 technically no longer exists because now that's paragraph 23. So the contract did technically get shorter by one paragraph, but in all, it's actually got one page longer, which is kind of funny. But coming down here, the only changes as far as broker information go is they now have an option for team name. So whether you're representing independently or if you happen to be intermediary, there is option for team names on both of those. And then again, this whole disclosure here is for informational purposes only, and it's basically saying that any agreement that has been made between the brokers has to be in writing and it has to be done in a separate agreement. And basically that whatever is here doesn't really matter because it's for informational purposes only. So you do have to have a separate compensation agreement in place. In most cases, if there's compensation listed in the MLS, then that's a predetermined agreement. So that generally will stand on its own and you can just put whatever the percent is there. If it's an off-market deal for sale by owner, maybe an expired listing or an investment deal of some sort, then you're going to want the agreement between brokers and you're going to put the corresponding amount there. So page 10 or page 11 in this case, the final page of both contracts. And this previous contract is 10 of 10. Now it's actually 11 of 11. So it's still the last page, but it did get one page longer, as I mentioned. The only change here is that previously the option fee could not be signed for by the escrow agent. Now they're the only ones that can sign for it. So seller or listing broker is not able to sign for the option fee anymore. It is only the escrow agent. And similarly, earnest money contract and additional earnest money receipt, those have always been signed for by the title company. Now, again, there's still the only ones that can sign for those. So guys, that's the end of the contract. Again, that wasn't the full-blown in-depth line by line that I've done previously. I was trying to keep it a little bit more condensed. If you want that version, I do still have it uploaded in my YouTube channel, but just keep in mind that that is the previous contract, 20-14. So it is not going to have these current changes, but that's why I was trying to do the side-by-side comparison. So you can see exactly what has changed, what hasn't changed. If you're interested in the red letter version that I have there, I'm going to include a link to download that in the description. So if you want to walk through it as you're filling out these contracts, you can see exactly what has or hasn't changed. Anyway, hope that was informational for you guys. Hopefully that was informative. Again, if you haven't been using this contract, well, no time like the present because it's been mandatory since April. And again, if you guys are interested in EXP, finding out anything more about that, I am building out my brokerage within EXP, and I would love to have you on board with that. Great splits, great coaching, great atmosphere and environment, and I look forward to catching you guys on the other side. If you're interested, shoot me an email, give me a call, send me a text. All my contact information is on the final slide here. Have a great night, guys. Talk to you later.